People forget this. I always say this. When does a new day start? It starts at midnight. Is it dark outside at midnight? Yes. So if a new day and a new beginning starts in the dark every day, that's when your new beginnings start. But so many people are afraid to go to that place.
And he's 100% correct. You know, I think some of the biggest changes that have ever happened in my life towards ending up being positive have always felt like the crumbling of the reality of my universe, of the things that I have around me. At the time when it's happening, it can be very, very difficult because, you know, emotions take over, your body goes into shutdown mode, you may be sad, you may be depressed, and so on and so forth. But eventually, when you stick it out long enough, you realize that actually this was the universe's way of redirecting me towards what's actually true for me, what it is that I actually want for my life. And just to give you an example, close to a year ago, I was working in a corporate job, you know, slaving away from 9 to 5, well, much longer than that, as an enterprise account manager. And, you know, I got made redundant. And I thank the source, God, however we want to call it, for doing that, because it gave me and although at the time it felt like my universe was crumbling, I lost a really high paid job, I didn't know what I was going to do, it also forced me to take a step back and think to myself, like, do I still want to live my life this way? How long am I going to keep living my life working a 9 to 5 and not really working on the production side, for example? Because it's very easy to say that you're going to come home after working, and it was a very tough job, like 10, 12 hours, to then come home and do production and everything else. It's easier said than done, and I'm sure a lot of people are in this sort of scenario as well. So it gave me the opportunity to take a step back and think to myself, like what am I doing? I want to be an international DJ and producer, but I'm not really taking the steps to go in that direction. I need to buy back my time. Somehow, some way, I need to make it work. Luckily, I have a friend, shout out Alan, who worked within the bar industries, and he's been playing in bars for quite a while. And luckily, I made the transfer into playing bars. And I'll tell you what, there was a massive financial sacrifice, but it is the most aligned I have ever felt and true to my mission and purpose that I ever have in my life. It's not easy. It's a bit of a slog on a day-to-day basis, to be completely honest with you, especially because, you know, as the true stereotype of a struggling artist is true. But I've bought back my time. I now have a lot more time on my hands to be able to actually produce and take care of social media and do the things that I need to do to further the career that I want to further. So the point that I'm making is, although at the time when I felt like I got made redundant, I felt like the world was crumbling, that was a redirection from the universe. And trust me, whatever it is that you're going through, whether it's a breakup, whether it's losing a job, etc., 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 in one way or another, it is a lesson, as long as you're willing to look for it and you're willing to look internally and ask yourself too, like, maybe, you know, what is it I've done wrong here? Or maybe if you haven't done anything wrong, just understanding that it is just a redirection in your life. And I promise you, give it a month, give it 6, give it a year, and you'll look back and you'll understand why what happened had to happen.
And I said this in Winning, different scares people. When you're different, it scares people. When the world is different, it scares people. Everything different scares people, but it attracts the right emotions, it attracts the right feelings, it attracts the right thoughts, and it attracts the right people. Because the people that are willing to not judge you and understand and know that these things are real, they are real. They will tell you, I understand. With both books that I've written, people were like, I thought I was the only one.
Look, and he's 100% correct, you know? I think it's easier said than done in this day and age, because the difficulty is, no matter what it is that you choose, whether it's your sexual orientation, whether it's your food taste, whether it's the gym you go to, whether it's the type of exercises that you do, calisthenics, Olympic lifting, normal bodybuilding, whether it's that you like different types of music, because you like jazz, because you like opera. Someone's going to judge you for one reason or another, right? So it becomes a really intense social pressure to conform to some sort of, you know, box. And it's quite difficult to then, it takes a lot of internal courage and security to then be able to stand up against those norms. I'm not going to name particular world events that have recently happened, I mean recently in the last few years, where you had to have some sort of spine to be able to say things as they were and not be seen as a conspiracy theorist. Anyway, moving on. I think it is very difficult, but it is super, super important to try and find yourself and understand yourself, because that way it allows you to show up as your truest version of yourself and who you are. And what that does is allows the people around you to understand you from the get-go to who you are and if they see themselves in that particular environment or universe. Be that partners, be that like relationship partners, romantic partners, be that business partners. So it is really, really important. Otherwise, you're going to get into a situation where, you know, if you're, let's say, for example, a nice guy and you keep putting other people first, you're going to get into a situation where you don't get what you want. You're going to build resentment towards other people, and then it will never work within any sort of, whether it's business or romantic, you know? So you have to be able to have the courage to stand up for what you believe in from the beginning. That takes a lot of internal self-reflection, and it takes, to be honest, I think the biggest bit it takes is a lot of guts to be able to stand up against whoever it is around you that is pressuring you. And it can be very difficult, especially if it's within your friendship group, and especially if it's through a major change that you have to go through, and then you have to change the friendship circle. It can feel very lonely, whilst no one talks about the fact that you're going to exit that group, but then you're probably going to be on your own for a little bit until you enter a new group as this newly formed being and turning up as your true self. And that may not happen overnight. It may take months before that happens, but it's a process that you really have to go through if you want to live your most authentic life and ultimately be the happiest you can be.
What do you have to do to make them forget about that mental scar? And that's where my niche came in. Like, okay, I need you to go out there and play at the highest level and not worry about what happened 6 months ago, 9 months ago.
One of the things that it really touches upon there, which I think is really important, not only within sports, but within life, is something they call in economics, the sunken cost fallacy, which is every decision that you've made so far, or the money that you've invested, or anything that's gone wrong in the past, that's in the past, it's done. You can't use that as part of the decision of the things that you want to do moving forward. It's about the position that you're in now, the present, and what you can do to change things going in the future, which is why he's saying, even with athletes, the hard part was not getting them back physically. That was the easy part, but it was the psychological part. Am I going to get an injury again? What's going to happen moving forward? Because they're taking all the baggage of the previous injury with them forward. I hope this serves as just a quick reminder that sometimes, even if you're in a very dark spot, don't think about all the things that have happened in the past. They happened. A little bit like the Stoics say, you know, control what you can control and don't control the things that you can't. You have to let those go for your own mental health and sanity, for nothing else. And just take the decision based on the factors of everything that is in the present. Don't think about everything that's gone, but yeah.
And there was a small article in the local newspaper that said Michael Jordan was tired of taking the physical abuse from the Detroit Pistons and wanted to get stronger. So I said, you know what? Now back then, remember, there's no cell phones, no emails. You just, there's no way of direct messaging, social media. There's no way of direct messaging anybody. There's 15 players on the basketball team. I'm gonna write 14 letters. The one person I'm not gonna write a letter to is Michael Jordan. He's the best. Why would he work with an individual that's never worked with a professional athlete? So I wrote 14 letters explaining my background, what I do, what my training philosophy is. And back then you put a stamp in it, you go to the post office, you put them in the mail, and they get delivered to the player's training facility and they get thrown in the locker as fan mail. Whether the player decides to open it up or not, that's up to them. Well, obviously somebody opened up one of the letters and Michael saw it in somebody else's locker, pulled the letter out, read it, and gave it to the team physician and the athletic trainer during that time and said, hey, find out what this is about.
I have to pause you there just to highlight the fact that most people would not send those letters.
I'm not most. There's nothing about me that qualifies as most. Because you know what? What's the worst thing that could have possibly happened? I'd be in the exact same situation I was in.
I think for many different reasons in today's society, because of the limitation that everyone wants to put on yourself, you can't do this and you can't do that, and this is not the way to do things, and so on and so forth. You slowly get managed, and I've said this in a previous video, into a box, and it's like, this is what you can do or you can't do. You don't really start thinking outside the box of how to put yourself forward and take chances on yourself, believing in yourself, because I guarantee you, ain't no one else going to do it for you. Either you do it for yourself or no one's going to do it for you. So what I love about this is that he took initiative. Within a production world, let's say for example, you know, you need to send your tracks out. I know everyone's doing it through TrackStack, and I know that's really convenient for the, you know, for the traveling artists because they can do it on the go, but that is what everyone is doing, is the normal given way of doing things. How is that ever going to separate you from anyone else? And of course, if your music's really good, that in itself will separate you. But what about if your music was really good and also you had the ability to differentiate yourself in another way? If I've learned anything in my 6 years of sales, is that the way you get ahead is, first of all, you have to be competent, which is you have to be very good with your music, and that is your product. Second of all, is somehow differentiating yourself from everyone else. And I bet you someone walking up to whatever famous DJ is that you like and handing them the music in one way or another more creatively, even just the face-to-face interaction could be the differentiator. But you know, like I heard a story, I think it was Mark Knight that was talking about it on a podcast, where someone had built a custom-made wooden box from India and then put the memory materialistic inside with the tracks, and I can't really remember what the relevance was necessarily to Mark, whether Mark liked that type of wood or India or some sort of cultural association, I'm not sure. But the important thing and the point that I'm trying to get across is he remembered it. He remembered how it happened. Obviously, don't be a muppet and do something that's so outrageous that the other person might be offended. Do something that it has good taste. And the point that I'm getting across is he remembered. It was different. And that's the way that you most likely will get ahead. But I think it all starts from what he's saying, which is having the courage and almost audacity to take a chance on yourself, to do something to promote yourself. So believe in yourself, take a chance, move forward. You've only got one life.
I said this podcast has been going for about a year and we're number one. And that is purely based on the fact that we believe the 1% will change our trajectory in an invisible way in the moment, but in a profound way over time.
Yes.
How important are those marginal gains to the athletes that you've worked with and in the work you do with them still today?
It's everything. It's everything. And it's in the details. You know, you just described all these little things and somebody come in, it doesn't matter. A great example was like, you know what? When we handed you the book, you're like, this cover is so much better than the other one. Switch it. It's the little attention to the little things that everyone thinks they won't notice. You hear this all the time. Don't sweat the small stuff. The 1%ers, the 0.01, they sweat every single detail. Because the one thing they let slip, somebody is going to use that to their advantage. You know, everyone says, don't worry about the things that you can't control. Well, these individuals, they want to control everything they can control so the uncontrollable becomes more manageable to them. So if they pay attention to every single detail obsessively over and over and over again, then when the uncontrollable happens, they can have a better chance of controlling it.
Yeah, you know, and he's 100% right to an extent, although I have, you know, a slight different take, at least when it comes to the creative side of things. I think you need to look at this as a short-term sort of long-term approach, and there's a separation between business and the creative world. I think when we talk about sort of the creative world, you can't let your perfectionistic nature take over and sweat all the small stuff, because the problem is you're gonna, you know, the skill disparity from when you start producing and even a year or two into producing is so big that you're not really producing the things that you want to be producing. So if you start sweating all the small stuff, you're never going to finish anything. And actually in the beginning, quantity breeds quality. And I think that's where sweating the small stuff doesn't really help. That being said, I think in the long term, if there's a particular skill that you want to learn, you know, if you find that maybe, I don't know, if you find that maybe your bass lines are not funky enough, maybe for the beginning, you're trying to learn the overall sort of structure of a song and, you know, how to do drum patterns, how to put in your chords and so on and so forth. So for the time being, you know, you just accept that your bass line, maybe you're not quite as funky as you want. However, in the long term, that's something that you have to fix. But generally speaking, by doing enough projects, you'll find that from project to project, you'll learn new things and eventually your bass line will probably become very funky anyway. Otherwise, if you really start sweating the small stuff, you can end up investing hours and hours and hours into a project and then get nowhere with it really. And like I said, quantity breeds quality. So if you're only making one track, you're never giving yourself the opportunity to basically be able to develop as an artist ultimately. That being said, on the business side of things, and this is just my experience, I think sweating the small stuff and being able to at least get an idea to, you know, 85%, not 100%, because there's no point being a perfectionist. You know, perfection is the enemy of done. It's more important, I would say that. I would say that having that feeling of 80 to 85% done is really important. Again, it's not going to be 100%, but at least you have an understanding that you've done as much preparation as you could in a time allocated at that particular time to try and make whatever venture is that you're doing a success. You're probably going to make mistakes. We all do, you know? So it's just one of those things where do as much preparation as you can. So I hope that sort of gives you an idea of the difference between sweating all the small stuff, or at least being perfectionistic, I would call it, within sort of like a creative aspect and also within sort of a business aspect. Until next time, Alex out.
Feel